Welcome to this webinar on analysis of successful deployments for Microsoft Teams. We'll talk about enterprise drivers, lessons learned, and best practices for maximizing the value of Microsoft Teams in your organization. I'm Sudeep Trivedi. I'm head of alliances and go-to-market for Logitech. And with me here is Craig Durr, Senior Analyst with Wainhouse Research. Welcome, Craig.
Sudeep, glad to be here. I'm excited about talking about this topic. This is going to be a really great one.
Great, and we are excited to have you here as well. You and Wainhouse have a lot of extensive research and insights in the unified communications and Teams, so really happy to have you here, and let me hand it over to you.
I appreciate that. Hey, let me start off by saying a little bit about Wainhouse, because in case some of the audience is not familiar with us, I just want to kind of help establish some credentials of why we're talking about Microsoft Teams. Wainhouse is a research and analyst firm. We do specialize in what we call enterprise communications. A lot of the coverage areas include a lot of the topics that your audience are interested in: unified communications, enterprise video, meeting room collaboration devices and methodologies, personal meetings, and audio conferencing. As an organization, we provide several services. Some of them are consulting, some of them are around strategy services, but in particular, we also do some primary research. And this is something that we've been doing as recently of some research that we have here around Microsoft Teams that I'm excited to share with the audience here. And let me start it off like this. Sudeep, this actually start off with the conversation that you and I had. It was a great conversation when we were talking about Microsoft Teams. And the idea was, hey, you know what? I'm seeing in market some people deploy Microsoft Team Rooms very, very early in their process of Microsoft Teams, but I'm seeing some that aren't as well, and it's a really drawn-out, elongated process. What's taking place there, Craig? Were there some drivers? Is there some things going on? Mm-hmm. And it was a good question, and so it prompted us to go back and take a look at that. Let me share with you what I did do and what I'd like to share going forward. So we had this conversation at the end of Q4, and I did a couple of things regarding this. I went and took a look at our existing data set that we had. We have a lot of surveys. We have a lot of interview information. We have a lot of firsthand knowledge of what's taking place with Microsoft Teams. Of course, there's ongoing technology discussions with vendors such as yourself, with Microsoft, with other people who are playing in that Microsoft ecosystem. But probably more importantly, what we did for this particular project is we went back and spoke to IT decision makers, and I'll refer to them as ITDMs here going forward. And we had some in-depth interviews, sat down with some people, having an hour or two conversation, and talked to them about what are your goals around Microsoft Teams or unified communications? What are your challenges? What are some of the ways that you're able to actually, provide this service to your end users? Let me share with you some of the things just to help level set about Microsoft Teams and why it's important. Here's what some of our data knows. I think you know this too, but it'd be great to share this with an audience. We put Microsoft Teams in a category that we call unified communications. Part of that is personal meetings. It's one of the things that we're able to follow as an analyst firm. Prior to the start of 2020, by the end of 2019, it was actually a really robust category. It was growing at somewhere around 18% of new licenses of people utilizing meeting services within their ecosystem, within their environment, adding like 8-9 million users per year. But there was a lot of things going on. End users had access to as many as 4 different meeting solutions on their desktops. This was told to us by end user survey that we did in Q3 of 2019. But through all that chaos, all that growth, there was something that was really surfacing, and that was Microsoft Teams really is setting itself up to be the preeminent service around unified communications, and more importantly, the meeting technologies. Here are a couple of statistics that were shared with some recent Microsoft press releases. At one point in time, they shared with us back in November that in terms of daily active users on the Microsoft Teams platforms, they had 20 million users, which is a very large amount. And they had over 27 million meeting minutes taking place, meetings per month. So a lot of people are using this product, and a lot of things are taking place in this meeting collaborative ecosystem that Teams creates. So asking about Microsoft Teams was the right ask, because this is where we're seeing a thrust of where people are spending their time and their energy to enable their end users. Now,
that's right,
as you and I know,
Yep, I was going to jump in and say there's a pretty unprecedented shift going in where people are working, how they're working with the work from home and things like that. What are you seeing in terms of what that means for Microsoft Teams and adoption of Teams meetings at home and at workplace?
Yeah, so here we are, Q1 of 2020, and everyone is dealing with a very a prevalent work from home scenario, right? There's a lot of increase taking place based upon what's taking place within the environment right now. And Microsoft, even in this short period of time, based upon what we're seeing in the environment, has experienced some very phenomenal, dramatic growth. Where I told you they had 20 million users as of November, they've added 22 million more users, so that as of March 18th of this past year, they're up to 44 million users. A lot of this has to do with employers having to adjust their work environments based upon current global situations. But with that said, this really does emphasize again that Microsoft is probably setting itself up to be the market-leading platform for communications, for content, for all these topics there. So it's a very timely conversation to have specific to this ecosystem. Let me go ahead and tell you more about why I think they are actually winning in this environment, though. When we're looking at Microsoft Teams, there's one fundamental idea. As a holistic solution, they really are disrupting a traditional UC value proposition that's taking place right now. So there's a lot of traditional value that's being delivered that most unified communication platforms can. I unified all my communications to a single platform. I have a good way to trace what end users are doing. But Microsoft, because of its presence and some of its other portfolio, is able to really disrupt this. Let me share with you some of these. Here's one of them, IT synergies. Talking to IT decision makers, some of the things that we just spoke about, their hands are already full with all type of fundamental, foundational management items, identity management for people, setting people up in systems. The fact that Microsoft Teams is so closely tied to what they're currently using for identity management, for security, things like Active Directory, allows them to provision or unprovision a user very easily, is a very key value that Microsoft has access to that not many of the UC providers do. The other thing is financial impact. So of course, Microsoft and any type of meeting solution can save money around certain cost categories, such as travel or something along that lines. But the fact is that by consolidating to a single unified communications platform, some of those savings are very, very sizable and very, very measurable. And one of the interesting things we discovered in this is that we're seeing CFOs standing arm in arm with their CIO counterparts, sponsoring these transitions to a unified communication platform, in particular Microsoft Teams, standing on the value of the consolidations of costs taking place there. A lot of end users have E3 or E5 enterprise licenses, and Microsoft Teams is already part of that, right? So there's a lot of services that they're already paying for, and it's a matter of lighting them up and enabling their end users. Employee engagement is another thing that Microsoft Teams is able to do much more significantly than some other vendors out there. Every employer we talk to says they have an agenda of trying to enable productivity within their employees. And the ability to do that really depends on how you can have them engage with each other. How can you have them engage around the work? And Microsoft Teams does this because it touches productivity apps, it touches communications, it touches content, it even touches messaging. I need a quick answer. Sudeep, I'm going to get on IM and I'm going to give you a quick message and do that. We need to have a call. We can just escalate that to an audio call or a video call and talk about something. I need to reference you to a file. I can point you to something, and there it is in SharePoint, and I can give you the link very seamlessly and very easily for you to go from the Teams environment to where you need to be able to get that content, and even pulling that content into the same window. So that employee engagement is a really strong factor in why they're winning. And of course, centralized security. There's not an IT administrator that's not thinking security first these days. It's a very important element, let alone vendors. And the fact is that when it comes to meeting solutions, sometimes it's not the top of mind thought when you're thinking about that. Because this is part of a Microsoft product, because this is part of everything tied into identity management, so it's tied into compliance, it's tied into data protection as well too. Microsoft Teams as a solution around meetings can deliver that level of security much more readily than some other vendors do, because it's all integrated already into what those people are seeing. So Microsoft Teams is really setting itself up for this, disrupting this traditional UC value prop. But Sudeep, let me go back to that original question we talked about and how we're seeing people deploy it. Let me share with you, I apologize. Let me start off with this. I want to share one quote before I do move forward here. This is from one of those IT decision makers that we've spoken to before. The thing that got him really excited, he said, look, Teams is a wrapper around everything I'm doing. It's around Teams, it's around Stream, it's around SharePoint. I have one all-purpose window that I can train employees on, that I can have them work within and enable them, whether they're working from home, in the office, or in a conference room. So it's a very powerful solution.
Great. And Craig, if I may jump in again, it's the whole messaging and the value proposition of being the hub for collaboration, right? It's the central place where you can go and be productive before the meeting, during the meeting, and after the meeting. So you have an overarching collaboration hub that you can go to anytime during the day and be productive and connect with people in your organization and across.
It really is. It really is. And then we're going to get to that in a little bit, because I'll tell you what, that value proposition you just mentioned is something that really comes to bear when the whole team stack, all the workloads are pulled together. And here's a great lead into that. You know, I was, when we went through and did some interviews with some IT decision makers, and we were trying to find out, well, tell us about how you're deploying the product. A lot of them we're finding are doing it by workload. So Teams has a couple of key workloads, right? It has content where people are creating and sharing information, and they're storing it on the SharePoint, accessing it through Teams. There's also an element of messaging taking place, where it might just be a quick instant message that might take place between one or two people. It might be a channel communications where a team is created and I'm sharing things with the team. And then ultimately, they've probably moved up to where they finally go to meetings. And meetings are really that audio and video real-time synchronous communications taking place. But what a lot of people do, and it's a typical UC deployment model, is to do this very synchronously. They feel there's a need to get enough momentum behind each step before moving forward. Let's make sure we cross all the T's and dot the I's. And it's a right move. You want to be very safe. But the challenge is they're creating some dependencies on that last step, and they're not pulling in the full value. When we were looking at best practices, we found some really interesting use cases that we want to talk about during this webinar with the audience. And that is actually when we started seeing some of our very successful IT decision makers not approach it as if they were deploying by workload, but instead they're employing this by end user synergies. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, of course, there's content, messaging, and meeting, but they're deploying them in a way such that they support and beget the uses within Teams to take place more. I have messaging, and I'm able to reference content. I have a meeting, I'm able to reference messaging and what have you. That holistic circle allows for people to become more integrated in their daily workflows with Teams. And this, we found out right now, was a very key idea on how people were able to shorten their time frame within their deployment of Teams and increase that adoption. So let's keep this in mind, because this is an idea that's going to come back and forth. And I'll tell you what, I actually have called out the meetings workload because, as you saw in the previous slide, a lot of people consider that as the last step. I'm going to do the conference rooms last. I want to make sure my end users are up and running, or I want to make sure I have everything running. It's a very prudent model. But having meetings, having work conference rooms, having shared spaces like huddle rooms enabled with Microsoft Teams actually is one of those great keys to success that we found in terms of helping people shorten their deployment time. And that's something we're going to talk a little bit further about here going forward. Okay? Let me go ahead and jump into a little bit more. And the idea was, why were these people hesitant about deploying the meeting workload? And the idea that came up was, I made this humorous quote here. This is not attributed to anyone in particular, but we've seen this a lot. And I'm sure you've probably seen this too. IT decision makers have to be risk adverse. And if they thought, when they first looked at Teams, there was something about it that didn't resonate with them around the meetings workload. Maybe it was a feature set that wasn't there. Maybe it wasn't quite ready for prime time. But there was something that they felt their status quo was good enough as they focused on other elements of team rolling out. And I think what really needs to take place for some of these people that are kind of behind on that adoption curve or deployment curve is it's time for them to take a new look at the meetings workload and what's taking place within meetings within Microsoft Teams. Let me put it in context. Microsoft Teams in this last 4-quarter period has probably had about 25 significant features released within the meetings space itself. And if we compare that to the prior products, Skype for Business or Skype Online, what we saw is this. There was only maybe 6 or 7 key features that were released in the same 12-month period. So it's a new paradigm. It's a cloud-connected paradigm. It's something that end users are used to. And as IT administrators start adopting to that, I think they're going to see that the features they were waiting for, the features they were desiring, are there or very near to be there within the roadmap.
And Craig, what you just said probably in some sense is also a testament and validation of how collaboration tools like Teams help with pace of innovation itself. I would imagine the Microsoft Teams engineering team uses tools like Teams, and that's how they're able to deliver that pace of innovation.
It exactly does. The productivity that these guys are probably utilizing firsthand in-house is directly contributing to what we're seeing here in terms of the products that we get to enjoy or have on a daily basis. But let's do this. So let me hit some of the key things around meetings as a feature set, as a workload that I want to make sure people are aware of that have been improved and updated probably since the last time they looked at Teams. Well, one of the first things is this: audio and video quality. Teams may have started off with maybe being 720p, but now it's fully 1080p in terms of its video quality resolution. The audio codecs that's being used is the latest audio codec. I'm not going to get into the technical terms about this, but the idea is that the compression rate and then the decompression of what's taking place within the audio stream is very rich and robust as well. And not only that, but there's other things that are taking place too. Better resolution, better bandwidth utilization, and even the devices and things in the room itself. We have cameras that actually have artificial intelligence built into them. As a matter of fact, I think Logitech has some that actually does some of this capability as well too.
Yeah, absolutely, Craig. We have been laser focused on using, AI, computer vision, machine learning, those sort of technologies to improve the audio and video experience. And you said, as you also said, that's one of the key elements of user experience in the room. As it is, Teams probably has one of the most highest bars in terms of certification for expectations and requirements for audio and video quality. But in addition, we have been working closely with Microsoft on implementing computer vision AI technologies for things like auto framing so that users don't have to fiddle with remotes in the room. Or things like using machine learning to improve the audio performance in the rooms to get rid of those annoying, sounds for opening bag of chips or HVAC or somebody typing furiously on a keyboard, things like that. So yes, you're absolutely right. That's a key element of innovation for us and Microsoft.
Exactly. So the audio and video quality right now is probably much better than what it was when it first started with. I know it is for a fact, and I just want to make sure that the audience is aware of that. There's some other problem areas that they weren't quite solved in the first launch of Teams, but let's talk about the next one, guest access, which is an important one. Now within Microsoft Teams environment, it's really easy for you and I to invite someone outside of our organization, our enterprise, to join us on a Teams call, whether it be within audio or video, and having the same richness of experience that we're having. And as well, based upon how policies set up around security, even within that meeting environment, we may or may not, we may be able to share content with them. We may be able to share a file with them or a link, depending on how it also ties into the holistic security story that we have as well. But now we can easily see and hear guest access coming in, whether they access through an application or through a browser-based experience. The other thing also that's improved vastly too is the mobile experience. Mobility is here to stay. This is an integrated part of our work environment taking place. We have people on the go, and it's not just the stereotypical salespeople. You and I are dialing in from home right now. Part of our mobile experience is, are we able to actually get in and have the same richness of experience, whether it be through our laptop, our mobile phone, or other devices that we may actually take with us in the experience. And it even applies what's taking place in the office itself. It's what I refer to as the internal mobile employee, people that are hot desking or people that are actually hoteling, right? So the Microsoft feature set around the ability to sit down at a generic workstation, log in with credentials, have it personalized to myself is something that Teams has delivered. Now I have a personal experience, and IT has devices that they're still controlling and managing. So that value winds up being very, very top of mind of what's taking place new in this environment. Let me go to one that I think is, though, really, really impactful. We talked a little bit about the audio and video, but that leads us right into the room experience in itself. There's two areas that I think Microsoft has done a fantastic job of improving. And a lot of it has to do with work that it's doing with partners, such as with Logitech, right? So over time, the devices have evolved to become very, very user-friendly. And the way they're doing that is this. The user interface that I see on my desktop experience, the one I'm becoming more and more familiar with, is very akin, very much alike the one that I see in that group environment as well. So personal and group experiences wind up being very, very similar. You remember the days of the first one, the Skype room system, right? And some of the challenges that were there?
Yeah, definitely. We've been in this journey together with Microsoft for almost 4 years now, when we first launched the Skype Room Systems V2 product. And you're right, the user experience, consistent user experience is definitely the key. The very first thing we learned from users is that simple single touch to join consistently across different room types. That was such a key element for them. But we also learned that IT and administrators needed a consistent deployment and management experience across the board as well. And those are some of the new innovations we have brought to the market over the last year or so with our tap-based, Logitech tap-based solutions for small, medium, and large rooms, where now you can consistently deploy the same set of solutions, now selling in over 75 countries worldwide.
Wow.
With a standardized blueprint and the same AI, machine learning, those sort of technologies I talked about with the flexible deployment model. But that user experience of simplicity of joining meeting, take the anxiety out of that first few minutes when everybody's anxious to get the meeting started and you don't have to enter codes and URLs. Those are some of the key learnings that we've applied. And real quick, the other thing I wanted to share, we have taken that learning and applied to desktop as well. So with the new line of Zone headset that we've just announced, you are also able to join your Teams meetings with tap on your, let's say, wireless headset or the dongle on your headphone. You can quickly join your Teams meeting. So the same kind of single tap touch to join, now we are bringing to desktop as well.
I mean, it's a beautiful synergy taking place with what the vendors are doing within the Microsoft Room experience. Again, the user friendliness is key. Let alone even those older versions that had so many cables running out the backside of them, right? Now with a device like the Tap that we see on the table, a single cable running, keeping a nice clean table that's approachable, that's a UI that you can bring close to yourself and really actually be familiar with. The other thing that's taking place.
Key learnings, sorry to interrupt you again, but the way our designer for TAP calls it is, the previous generation of products, in a lot of cases we see hardware in some sense in the room is a celebration of technology. It's kind of sitting in the middle of the room, grabbing your attention. Now we have moved to a model where the technology kind of blends away and blends into the environment, so that the face-to-face, the human video collaboration is really what you should care about, and not so much how the technology kind of presents itself in the room.
That's great. I mean, more or less what you've created here is you've created the remoteless meeting, right? There's no remote control in that context, right? I can walk in, I can tap, I can share information. I can seamlessly log in with my laptop at the same time based upon the Microsoft feature set that they have as well too. And you're just doing what you're doing, collaborating, meeting, conversing, right? You started to allude to one of the second things I want to make sure also. I think one of the other great things that's taking place in the room experience right now is that the Microsoft partners, vendors such as yourself, like Logitech, have done a phenomenal job of providing devices for not only the small rooms, which is where they really started, but to the medium rooms and the large rooms as well. And what does that mean? So you may need to have additional microphones or additional speakers. And within this Microsoft Teams room, having those as USB compatible devices, but yet still give you a quality of an integrated audio or video experience in that medium and large room is fantastic. And I have to tell you, it's these days at price points that are very, very affordable and very, very attractive to Teams enable much more rooms than in the past.
Agreed. The analogy we like to use is now the cost of technology for equipping meeting room is just as much as buying a new desk or a chair for the meeting room.
It really is, right? It really is bringing itself down right now. The total cost of ownership in those rooms and then the value out of them is actually phenomenal. You know, when I was talking to some of these IT administrators, I talked to one gentleman. He is actually the VP of IT for a global media company. It's actually 9 companies under a single umbrella. So this gentleman is dealing with 100,000 plus users right now. And the thing that he kept reiterating was, you know, if it's easy, my end users use it. If the room experience works, it kind of helps them in this whole process. And you get this great thing taking back and forth where it drives the need for conference rooms. Conference rooms drive the use cases for Teams adoption at the desktop. And that room experience really does help create this cycle that we talked about before of Teams begetting more Teams use. And it was a great point to call up here in this scenario. But let me go ahead and move forward on this story. I wanted to talk also about this workload, meetings, providing benefits beyond the expected. I realized after I put together this image, this slide, there's actually kind of the double entendre there. It is meeting more benefits beyond the expected here. It is delivering to us. One of the things that we've seen is that people are able to actually leverage some tools. Here's a great example of another EVP leveraging tools within the Microsoft ecosystem within its BI analytics tool. He's able to actually record percentage increases of number of attendees in rooms, of meetings, number of meetings being booked as well too. So there's a lot of great benefits, but let me go ahead and double click on a few of them that were really caught our eyes. There was actually 5 of them that I really wanted to highlight here. This isn't all of them. And keep in mind also, I don't want to dismiss that there's benefits here beyond the given cost savings around things like travel and what have you. But some of these other things that are holistically supporting larger enterprise goals is kind of important to call out because these are tangible. These are important to IT administrators and their managers. I'll start with the first one, meeting transformation. Well, one of the key things that we're noticing with Microsoft Teams is it is changing how people think about meetings. What might have been a very tenuous in-person situation that required time and energy getting 5, 6, 18, 19 people in a room has now become enabled with a platform that allows for people to join more readily. Collaborations, meeting times become shrunken, collaboration increases, productivity increases as well too. It's especially true, we found with companies that tend to come from a very audio-centric background, right? Microsoft Teams has a wonderful audio option as well, but just simply turning on the camera and creating video has added another sense of richness and depth to those meetings that really transform what's taking place in terms of productivity and environment. It actually goes right into the next area, which is increased collaboration. People are noting that if I'm able to see you and you're able to see me, we're able to get much more information communicated in a much shorter period of time or much more efficiently. I get to understand if what I'm saying to you makes sense or if it's not. And within that same Microsoft Teams environment, we talked about this before, a lot of these things being integrated, the things such as content, pre-meeting notes you talked about, agendas, post-meeting notes, action items, all these things can actually take place under a single cover, that Microsoft Teams blanket. And it allows, again, for collaboration to increase, productivity to increase as well, too. What really is here is the common variable is mass deployment. Everyone having access to Teams, everyone having access to the meetings environments, everyone having access to the tools on the back end as well. That was one of the key things we saw. Another area, very important to a lot of IT administrators, but also to their peers within corporate real estate and within facilities, is the workplace transformation. So this is something that as an industry we've been supporting and seeing for a long time. This is the idea that people are moving from some traditional spaces, such as we call them as cubicles or cubicle farms, to more open office spaces, right? More open office spaces then mean that you probably need to have some more shared spaces, such as huddle rooms or conference rooms available. Or as people continue to evolve this, they're creating other activity-based centers as well too. It might be a cafeteria that has a bench that is a meeting while having a lunch meeting, or it might be a stand-up meeting space that a agile scrum team might be having as well too. Transformation is taking place in the physical environment of the workspace, and Microsoft Teams provides a great technology to help stitch these places together. All these places have a common interface about how people can meet, how people can talk to each other, how they can collaborate, and then afterwards where they can share content and where they can share messaging as well too. Teams is a great catalyst for this type of idea. I used a word kind of talking about the next one here, which is cloud catalyst. As much as you and I have probably already are aware of our own personal companies already transitioned to cloud-based solutions, whether it be for content storage or whether it be for messaging, a lot of people are still struggling in that challenge. They have workloads such as I have a file share still located on premises in a closet somewhere, or I have a messaging solution or a PBX solution or something like that that's still on premise. Teams creates a way for end users to move those workflows to Teams workflows. I can do calls on Teams. I can do content sharing on Teams. I can store content. I can do meetings on Teams as well too. And the beauty of it is Teams is a cloud-based solution, right? Where a lot of this, the IT administrator has the opportunity to provide, they can maintain some on-premise needs as they want to, but they can also then move some of these workloads behind the scenes to the cloud. So end users adopt workflows because they're easy. IT administrators get to move workloads to cloud-based solutions, which aligns with that. And one of the best things we heard when talking to people was what we call the hero factor. IT as a hero is something that you sometimes don't hear enough of. So as a solution, the IT administrators that were behind Teams do have the benefit of delivering a very high-quality audio-video experience. But the factor that came in well here that really resonated with us is those IT administrators that then leveraged other elements within that Teams and Microsoft ecosystem. APIs, SDKs, the ability to build solutions within Microsoft Teams or to integrate Microsoft Teams within other workflows. One great example that we have was of a healthcare provider that created a self-help bot that lived on Teams. They called it Intern Steve, and I think I might mention it later on in the presentation. But Steve was a great way for this person to help solve a trouble ticket challenge they had of getting first-line questions solved before going to a live person, directing that person who needs some help or some questions to the right resources, and saving some time and energy for everyone involved. So IT gets to be a hero because there's tools and best learnings that they can leverage here in this process. I think all of this is something very important to keep in mind. Okay, so with all that said, but I want to make sure that I don't lose sight of this. I'm sorry, I keep forgetting about some of these great quotes that I have here. This is that same gentleman I was just talking about. For him, what he said was, Teams is honestly the first product he's been excited about in a very long time. And it's a very interesting sentence. You don't hear IT administrators getting excited about products. Usually they have hesitation, reservation, they're risk-averse people, right? Teams has a lot of potential for total cost of ownership and return on investment, especially when people start thinking about it in deploying all three of those workloads that we talked about before, content, messaging, and meetings. So after talking to some of these guys, and we did the opportunity to talk to some and understand, okay, you've had great success. You've done some key things to help shorten your deployment cycle to increase your adoption. What are some of those things that you've done as you think about these user-centric synergies that you want to do in terms of deploying Teams? Well, there's a lot of best practices out there already. I think, Logitech probably has some information on their websites or through their sales teams about that as well too. But here are some interesting ones we uncovered that go beyond the basics, and I want to share those. I think I have 5 of them here. This one's a very simple one, or it maybe seem a little bit out in left field, but it's an important thing to take place to pull into this. Having a logical naming convention in what you're doing around teams becomes a very important element. And what do I mean by this? Well, it's a new way that people are going to be looking for information, looking for people. Making sure that when you set up channels, when you set up teams, when you set up the file shares behind them, the share points, do they have names, conventions that people are familiar with? Because remember, some of these people are transitioning from having a very static file-based system of information stored. I have file A, and below that I have my 12 months, and I put my different information and all that. You want to make it easy for them to transition from the workflows that they're familiar with to moving it forward. This was interesting because this came up, and it wound up being a very logical step when you think about it. It's something that wasn't much of the forethought when people were thinking through this. The other thing is about mining data. I alluded to this before, using tools that are available to them like BI or analytics that's available, meetings analytics. IT administrators are able to learn what's taking place and adjust their deployment or their education strategy accordingly, right? So end users, I'm on Microsoft Teams, I believe you are as well. We get these emails that tell us about our usage analytics as an individual. As an IT administrators, they can get this around entire groups, what's taking place analytically, automatically generated for them. And this information then can be presented, sliced and diced in Power BI, and it allows them to really look at the data and drive data-driven decisions to help further along that deployment idea. So don't overlook the tools that are available about mining the data. Viral engagement is another key to success we found. Now, what is this? It seems that in every organization, there seems to be some 1 or 2 internal champions, end users, that have found some way to leverage Microsoft Teams to do something better that they were doing before. Changing their own workflow, using Microsoft Teams as a way to close a PO or maybe to close out a communication loop of something that was done right there. What we found is that one of the great keys to success is when IT administrators, IT decision makers, help promote this type of idea. It could be as simple as creating a channel within Teams itself and actually allowing end users to share their own best practices they figure out, of course. Other ones wind up doing where they have webinars similar to what we're doing. They might have monthly emails or newsletters, but don't lose sight of end users' ingenuity of using the solution to solve their problems they have and then sharing that with other people. It's a great key to success there. This one's very important, and I think a lot of people talk about it, but truly getting it in place is what is key, and that's executive sponsorship. And I want to be clear, this is not just having your C-suite come down and say, you must use this software, you must use this application. It actually is leading by example. One of the key ways that this can take place is just having your staff meetings, having your key executives have their all hands take place in Teams. Well, why? Because the end users, the people that want to participate, need to participate in a Teams environment. If there's information to be shared, maybe an agenda, maybe follow-up items, they're going to go back to that Teams environment to learn about it. Again, the idea that meetings can help beget other team usage is a key element. Executive sponsorship, executive usage of the platform winds up being a key element of that. And the last one, and I've kind of already spoken about this a little bit. I think you also believe in this too. You can't forget about the idea that rooms, conference rooms, huddle rooms are an important element of end users' experience, both at work and even at home. And enabling them becomes a catalyst. Well, in the work environment, I may want to communicate with you. You're actually at home. We wind up going in, and I have a familiar environment that we can easily get in a call, and vice versa. I may be using that just for a collaboration space, right? Microsoft Teams environment allows me to walk in, share content with people in the room, take notes, create a channel, save information as well too. This is one of the key elements that we found, and this is what I want to make sure is not lost. Making rooms as part of your adoption strategy as opposed to a step in the process is a key change of mindset that I think needs to take place in this environment.
Okay, Craig, and we also see kind of a symbiotic relationship, I would say, between desktop and meeting rooms. So we see customers who have deployed Teams on desktops. Those users, when they go to meeting rooms and see old school speaker phones where you have to dial numbers and codes, or those archaic video conferencing systems which are so hard to use, they go back to IT and say, hey, why can't I have the same modern Teams meeting experience in the rooms as well? And then we also see an opposite side of it, which is organizations that have already deployed Teams in meeting rooms where you have the nice modern single touch join video and all of that. They're going back to IT and saying, hey, why can't I have the same collaboration experience on my desktop as well? Why am I stuck to good old phone on my desk? Why can't I have the same video conferencing experience at my desk or my home that I have in my meeting rooms? So we do see that sort of symbiotic relationship between the two.
I think that's spot on, and I think it's a great example. And to the IT administrator's decision process, as they think about this, the price performance of these Microsoft Teams Room solutions, the Logitech bundles, for example, are phenomenal. And as video-oriented meetings become more ubiquitous, it becomes very affordable with high-quality solutions to enable huddle rooms and smaller spaces that may not have been video enabled in the future. And especially in combination with that workplace transformation, right? Losing dedicated desks to more common shared space, but you still need to step away to have either a collaboration session or a private session. The price performance cannot be beat what's available within the market as a room as a catalyst. So to put a bow on this, these are some great keys to success, and this is one of the key things I want to have our viewers think about going forward. Yes, there's a lot of best practices out there, and they can find plenty of them available from Microsoft, from Logitech, from other vendor partners as well. But there's some great ones that they should not overlook. These are key in helping to shrink the deployment cycle, increase adoption of what's taking place. And there's a flip side to them also. I don't want to say that the status quo, the way of doing it, is wrong, but there is some downsides by continuing to do this workload by workload deployment methodology, right? Here's a couple that came up in our interviews and looking back at the data right now. Well, we kind of alluded to this, right? The workplace is transformation. And if the technology doesn't keep up to it, you're not supporting that workplace transformation. And you can be an anchor keeping your corporate real estate initiatives or your facility initiatives behind, right? What's key about the workplace transformation is a technology that acts as a wrapper that really does help bind all the workflows and the workspaces and how people want to work together. So keep that in mind. You don't want to be the anchor of what's taking place. The other thing that's taking place too is end users are already starting to think about working in this type of environment where it's asynchronous communications, where they have cloud-based file storage, some other vendors out there, where they want to meet over video and it may not be enabled in all their rooms. And these solutions are becoming affordable, freemiums coming in. There's a lot of shadow IT starting to take place in the enterprise environment, and that's a dangerous thing to take place. We can talk about security risk. We can talk about IP leakage. We can talk about all types of situations taking place. Not being up to speed on a unified communication solutions as your end users are demanding it because your deployment cycle is too long, actually could be a risk, and it's a downside you have to keep in mind. It also goes, again, to your end users, right? If they still have disparate systems, if they still might be having content sharing and messaging taking place in Teams, but they're still meeting with, like, I like the term that you said, archaic video systems or over audio systems or what have you, they still have to break their workflow. I'm going from system A to system B to continue finishing this project. I have a file that's located over here. Said in the meeting, I'm going to share it with you. I need to come back to my desk now and share it, as opposed to doing it very easily and ubiquitously while we're in that same thing. So, that lower productivity takes place. Plus, these might be IT supported systems. You have costs because you have multiple solutions in place trying to perform these same workloads. The opportunity to get them to a single provider of something that's cost relevant because you're already paying for a lot of the solutions and a lot of the feature sets, and increase your end users' productivity becomes a really, really important element. So this isn't the down. This is just the downside of the status quo. I'm not saying it's wrong. There's still value in that workload by workload methodology. But there's some key ideas here that I think you should be considering, especially as you're transforming your IT to meet the transformation taking place in the workplace. Tell you what, let's go ahead and do this. Let's go ahead and talk about some next steps and final thoughts. I think this is something that's key to kind of put a wrapper on this. And here's a couple of things I shared here. If you're still on the fence about Microsoft Teams, we talked about a lot of these people that are still reviewing it. I really do encourage you to give it another look, especially around functionalities such as meetings. I think you'll find that the feature set's robust, that it's probably addressed a lot of the needs that you have, such as guest access, such as security needs, such as the availability of devices for the different types of rooms that you have. I encourage you to make sure you give Microsoft Teams an honest new look if you're still on the fence about it. I think the other thing also, you need to evaluate your deployment strategy. Again, a workload by workload deployment strategy isn't wrong. I'm not saying that is wrong, but the opportunity to drive end user synergies might be prolonged by doing it that way. And pulling some of these workloads in, especially meetings, where you start making that same UI available in group settings as well as personal settings, really help drive the end user seeing similar ideas and similar workflows, which is very powerful. And then also, I encourage you to go back and take a look at these slides and the ebook that's going to be accompanying this also, and take a look at the additional best practices. See which ones apply to your deployment. It might be the idea that you want to make sure that rooms are available very easily and ubiquitously. It might be having to do with how you name your files or your naming conventions around what's taking place in channel on your different channels. But give an honest look at some of these other best practices beyond what's already known in market. And then let me wrap this in a final thought. I want to say this, in essence, what you're trying to do as an IT administrator is this. You're trying to encourage your end users to change how they work. And it's a very, very noble idea that you want to help them with their productivity, with their output, and their happiness in what's taking place here, right? But you can't just turn it on like a faucet. You've got to do some things to help them, enable them along the way. Changing workflow is kind of an ethos. It's something that needs to be nurtured along. What's really nice about this Microsoft ecosystem is that you have the tools, you have the techniques, and you have partners such as Logitech out there to help you in this process, right? Tools can help you accrue insights, data that you can mine to see how people are using it. You have the ability to engage executives to help champion this process and help make this a little bit more of a meeting platform for all. From every type of use case, whether it be the all hands to the staff meeting to just the one-on-one. And actually, don't forget about the public or shared places, because you really need to think about Teams deployment as being something that can enable a lot of solutions, help you lower your total cost of ownership in these spaces, and really helping to increase the return on those investments taking place. I think it's a great time to relook at this, and I think there's some great lessons that we can learn from the information that you and I have collected.
Great. Craig, those are all fantastic insights. Thanks so much for sharing that with our viewers today. I also want to share with our viewers that if you go to the URL that you see on the screen, logitech.com/Microsoft, you'll see an ebook which has more detailed information related to the insights that Craig and Wainhouse have captured around Teams. And you'll also see some additional material from Logitech on Microsoft Teams related solutions, both for desktop and the meeting rooms. So again, thanks, Craig, and thanks to all the viewers for joining our webinar today.
Sudeep, thank you for having me. This has been a great experience.
Great, thanks.